You cannot find in the U.S. media a positive statement about some social development or social formation in any socialist or revolutionary country. That's simply not what you can find. I mean, of any significance. I mean, I could take that back and say, I did read an article about 4 years ago about the bus system in Budapest, where they said it was a very good bus system in Hungary. I mean, occasionally, I read an article once in the New York Times about 6 years ago about the Sandinista government in Managua and how they wanted to plant trees in Managua and refurbish the city with a lot of trees. And without any negative snide statement in it. It's just a straight story about that. Occasionally, something like that will come in. But generally, the overall thrust is this ideological pounding that we've been getting again and again. And what we have to do is be less selfless. We have to be more selfish. We are too selfless. We are too concerned about whether other people hear both sides of the story. Do the Russians hear both sides? Do the Cubans hear both sides? Do those Chinese hear both sides of the story? We have to start really asking ourselves, being a little more selfish and be concerned about ourselves. It is your mind that is getting boxed in by your media. It is our minds that are being affected. This is our struggle, and we have to ask, do we hear both sides? Do we have access to other areas and other sources of information? By the way, that question came up in Reykjavik. Do you remember Gorbachev made the statement that while we were supposedly there for an arms discussion, President Reagan turned the whole matter to a question of pluralism and our society and their society, and why don't you have things open? And we said we would stop jamming your radio messages if you would allow access of our radio messages. We said, Gorbachev saying, we have taken your movies in, why don't you see some of our movies? It's true. You can go to the Soviet Union and see American movies. When I was there, Soviets were all lining up to see Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman, which was a very good movie with a very intelligent script in it. Gorbachev could have gone further. He didn't. He could have talked about books. He could have talked about novelists. When you go to the Soviet Union and you hear them talking about American novelists, and you realize nobody in your group could name one novelist. When you go to the Soviet Union, as I did as head of a delegation of economists and political scientists, and you turn to our guide Natasha, who had a PhD in economics, and some of our guys turned to her with that look of compassion and supplication as you would to anybody who is deprived, and you say, Natasha, do you get the chance to read any Western, any American economists? And she said, well, I read Schumpeter and Samuelson and Magdoff and O'Connor and Milton Friedman, even, the reactionary. And they all said, oh. And then she said, have you read Navroshka, Batoshka, Varuska, Baraska, Boryoshka? And of course, they hadn't read these guys, and none of us read them, couldn't pronounce it, didn't know who she was talking about. But we were concerned as to whether or not she was, and that's true, by the way, through all the social sciences.